All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Failing Up as an Entrepreneur, a fireside chat with Jane Park, founder and CEO of Tokki. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ellen Sue, Yale College class of 2013. It's good to see you all again. I am a member of the leadership team of Accelerate Yale and Yale Angels. Accelerate Yale is a global community of diverse alumni and friends of Yale engaged in innovation, tech, and entrepreneurship. Our mission is to cultivate an active, inclusive ecosystem that thoughtfully promotes meaningful connections and collaborations, while also serving as a bridge between alumni and current Yale students. Please note that we are being recorded with all participants muted. Today's session will be 1 hour and we'll reserve the final 25 minutes for your questions. If you do have a question that you'd like to submit, please do so via the Q&A button on the bottom bar of your screen and we'll pull the questions from there. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing our moderator for today, Wendy. Wendy is an independent consultant providing services in project management, event, communications, and community building. She holds a BA in English from Yale, an MPA from Harvard's Kennedy School, and an MBA from MIT Sloan. She serves as a member of the YAA Board of Governors, as well as the director for the leadership teams of Accelerate Yale and Yale Angels. Good to see you.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Ellen. All right, everybody. I'm very excited to introduce our guest for this evening, Jane Park, founder and CEO of Tokki. Jane is the CEO and founder of Tokki, a social and sustainable gift wrap company. Tokki brings connection, thoughtful technology, and sustainable design to make gifting unforgettable, merging reusable physical gift wrap with a digital social experience. Tokki is reinventing gift giving. Each year, over 4 million tons of single-use gift wrap ends up in landfills because it is too thin, coated, or saturated to be recycled. Tokki is designed to be regifted over and over, and 10% of the profits from each sale go to organizations that protect our planet. Prior to founding Tokki, Ms. Park was the CEO and founder of Julep, an online-first beauty brand now distributed nationally at Ulta stores, as well as on QVC and Nordstrom. A disruptor in the beauty space, Julep innovates rapidly by co-creating with its customers through social media and personalizing offerings to each subscriber. Ms. Parks have successfully raised over $50 million in venture capital financing from Silicon Valley firms, including Andreessen Horowitz, and led Julep to a private equity exit in 2016 to a beauty roll-up funded by Warburg Pincus. Ms. Park is also an executive at Starbucks in the New Ventures division, where she launched new consumer businesses. She was also a leader at the Boston Consulting Group and the Retail and Consumer Goods Practice Group, and a founding director of the CEO Forum for Education and Technology with luminaries such as Steve Jobs, the former CEO of Apple, and Eckhard Pfeiffer, CEO of Compaq. A nationally recognized expert in consumer brand building and social commerce, Ms. Park regularly appears on television as well as consumer, technology, and women's leadership conferences. She is a graduate of Princeton and Yale Law School. Welcome, Jane. We're so delighted to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for including me and for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Jane, the topic of this evening is failure, which is a big, scary topic, but a really juicy one at the same time. So why don't we get started? First, I'd love to know more about your path into entrepreneurship. You emigrated from Korea with your parents, and your parents were entrepreneurs, and then you went to Princeton and then Yale Law School. I'm really curious, why did you become an entrepreneur? And the big question, how did your parents react to this decision?
You know, I think a lot of the way that I think about the world and about being able to try something new and to take on risk and to go for trying to make something better, all of that was ingrained in me because I just saw that every year. My parents, when we moved when I was 4, I didn't speak English. And so I just know what it's like to be in an environment and not be able to say the things that you want to say, like basic things like, can I go to the bathroom? So from all of that, though, to watch every year as we moved to a better and better rental apartment, there was just physical evidence every year that things could get better and that they could work hard to make that happen. So I think that was a really lasting impact on me, although they really did not like it when I said that I was starting my business. So I think their actual quote was, you went to law school. We've been telling our friends you're a lawyer. And the business I started was a clean green nail parlor. And they said, now you're another Korean starting a nail business. What will we tell our friends? So that was, their initial response, and they cried, which happens very rarely. But I had actually, seen them do that before. When I told them I wasn't going to go to law school, I was going to actually go to India to work on a women's cooperative. Law school was always sort of supposed to be a little bit of a ruse. I wasn't sure I wanted to go. I really wanted to do this other thing, but I knew my parents wanted me to have a plan. And they did cry then too. And they said, we have sacrificed so much for your education, get your law degree, and then you can do whatever you want. So I fell for it at that point. I was like, oh, I have to do what my parents want. They're crying. And when it happened again, when I wanted to start a company, I realized I could withstand it, and I knew better.
So interesting. So I'm curious, actually, that experience of watching your parents adjust to a new country, your own experience as an immigrant. I'm curious about how that experience has also influenced your decision-making as an entrepreneur, and also how your experience as both a woman and an immigrant has affected your relationship to the whole concept of failure in the first place.
I think one central theme for me has always been realizing that if there can be two ways of doing things, then there can be more. Just the freedom from the idea that there is only one way is the first step in breaking up with the idea of perfection. So there were things like my parents thought that the sky would fall if we took the time to say times and equals in between multiplication tables. So we had to say 224, 236, 248 and recite the entire multiplication table, right? As a small thing. And then they would time us. And I realized that nobody else I knew did this. And it seemed like all of my friends were pretty smart and were good at math. And it made me realize that there was more than one way of doing things. That, for my parents, I really like this idea, actually. They always had me come to the front door when they walked in. So it's like, we work really hard. When your parents come home, you go meet them at the front door. I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. I could be gone for a business trip for days. I can come back and it's my dog at the front door, but not my kids, right? But it was like, the sky will fall, the family will fall apart, everything that we've taught you about culture will not exist. You will be erasing our identity if you do not do this thing. And I realized that at other houses, again, that didn't happen, and they still loved each other. And so the idea of, oh, there's a lot of different ways to have a family. There are a lot of different ways to express love and respect. That was such an early lesson, because every day, in a way, you're immigrating between two different cultures. You're speaking this language, you're moving back and forth between these different worlds. And I think that's a super freeing concept, because it just, once you shatter the notion that there's only one way of doing something, then you can make up your own rules. It was sort of like, okay, I want to borrow this from Korean culture and this from what I'm learning from my friends, and I can make up my own path. And I think that is central to being an entrepreneur, is to be able to say, I want to borrow this and I want to borrow that, and I can make my own map and make my own way.
Interesting. I'm curious, when you were at law school, and it sounds like you weren't that sure that you even wanted to be a lawyer, and yet you went to law school anyway. I'm curious, how did you feel in terms of how you fit in at the law school? Did you feel a little bit out of place? Did you feel like, oh, my mind works a little bit differently. I'm not sure that I want to, go on and clerk for somebody or work in a major law firm? Or did you feel as if this type of training and the people who are around you were kind of your people? I'm just curious about how an entrepreneur actually would fit into a place like Yale Law School.
I think both of those things were true. Really, when I look back today, I met my husband at Yale Law School, and some of my very best friends, and who have influenced who I am and to enrich my life all the time. So I would absolutely feel like I found my people more than I had in undergrad. But also felt sort of out of place. I think a lot of people who might not fall naturally into the whole, the way that the classroom is structured and the calling upon you, that I know a lot of women, and probably I struggled with this some too, felt like this was the first place where you weren't smart, where you are coming across being, publicly evaluated for your intellect. And there are some incredibly smart people who are very good on their feet, and that kind of intelligence is on display in a different way. So I wish I could go back and tell my younger self. And when I do connect with people, with law students today, I try to remind them that there are so many different paths. And the main, what you're getting out of the place is how to think deeply, how to figure out where your values intersect with a system, a legal system, constitutional system, and how you're going to navigate conflicts. I think it's really kind of today, going to law school in this insanely polarized world. I think that ability to navigate and to pull the different pieces of your authentic self out and figure out how that fits in this universe is such an important thing. I think I wish I had done that a little bit more, to see my life's project as more about figuring out more and more who I am, not figuring out how to become the best academic lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your foray into your first startup, Julep. How did you go from Yale, the women's cooperative in India, and the green nail salon and law school, into your first startup? Talk to us about your decision to start a business, and what you learned in that process of your first startup.
I think the most important thing that I learned, so I was at Starbucks when I had this idea for a social, clean, green nail parlor. So at the time, a lot of nail polish had formaldehyde in it. And also women who worked in that industry didn't have access to healthcare benefits. Mm-hmm. And so I thought the idea of Starbucks, how there was an extra third place, Howard Schultz calls it, place where people can connect and get together, that was something that would be great to have for women. That sometimes when I wanted to get together with my business colleagues, I didn't want to go to a basketball game. I'm not super into sports. I don't golf. That having a place that we can go where it's not a spa necessarily, where you are in separate rooms, that would be something that could be a helpful place in the universe. And so I ran the idea by a bunch of people. I actually, in my nights, must have been a bad TV year, but I would work my day job, go home. I had 2 kids, and kind of get them to bed. And then I would start working on my business plan at 9 o'clock at night till 1 or 2 in the morning. And I wrote a 50-page single-spaced Microsoft Word document that had every detail that I could think of, that I ran the spreadsheet a million different ways from my time at BCG. I had pulled all of these things together, and then I kept talking about it. So this, I encourage everybody who's an entrepreneur, or basically anybody anywhere thinking about anything to do, is that we should share our thought process with people so you can get input, so you can throw it out there as a minimally viable thought, and then have somebody give you input to grow it and to make it better. And that's what I ended up doing. And actually, I called my former mentor, Steve Gunby, who was the head of BCG for North America at the time. And I was just talking about this idea, and I kept talking and talking, gross margin per square foot, and all of the things I learned at Starbucks that I was going to bring to this concept. And finally, he said, Jane, is this like NPR? If I invest, will you go away? And that's how I got my first investment. And I realized it was because I didn't know the words to ask for an investment. I'd never done this before. So being an entrepreneur is doing lots of things that you have never done before, and making a million decisions a day. When I was at Starbucks, I made maybe one decision a year. I would sort of carry around this idea from room to room and try to get cross-functional consensus to do the pilot test that we needed to get to the metrics we needed to launch it. So it was sort of a very long and involved consensus building process. When you're an entrepreneur, it might not be a decision that big, that is tens of millions of dollars, but it's sort of every day you're deciding, who to hire, what to do about this performance issue, where the light switch goes was another just random decision, how to sign a lease, how to create shares, all of these things you don't know. But the first thing I didn't know was how to ask for money. So afterwards, I thought about this, and I realized I'm not asking him because I don't have the words to say it. I don't have the words to ask him. And I came across, so I thought about, how am I going to do this? Do you want to invest? It just sounded impersonal and weird. You can't be like, write me a check. Like, what do you say? Give me your money. Like,
exactly. Like, so awkward. Hello.
So I landed on explaining this whole venture, saying, like, from the beginning, even though we're not profitable, we're going to give healthcare benefits. There's this mission-driven thing. And then also to say at the end, would you like to participate? So those were my words. And that felt right to me, that we're on a journey together. So it was funny because years later, when I was raising money from Silicon Valley, and I would wake up at 4 a.m, pack 2 lunches, get on a 6 a.m. flight to the Bay Area, pack 8 meetings. And I didn't realize, like, Sand Hill Road, I thought, hey, that sounds friendly and sandy, and I'll get a car and go from place to place. And it was actually a lot bigger of an ordeal getting from one VC firm right next door to another VC firm within the hour, but I would pack in the meetings and then fly home that night. So that's how I did it. And I would run into these, what I would say were 25-year-old dudes who didn't, brush their hair, and, and I just would chit chat waiting in the lobby. And one time I asked a guy, I was like, hey, I had a hard time figuring out the words to ask for an investment. What do you say? And he said, oh, that's easy. I just asked them whether you want to be on the right side of history. So we had very different approaches. But I think, I don't say that entirely critically. I think it's just, you have to speak in your authentic voice and find your way of doing things, doing everything. And again, that's where I think that immigrant experience of, I can reinvent everything the way I want to live it, it helped so much, because whether it's asking for an investment, or how do you walk into a room, or how do you present, like nobody told me how to do a pitch deck. I've seen some. I decided to put my life's history at the beginning, because I thought, if you don't buy into me as an entrepreneur, this whole thing is a waste of time. So I want to know upfront, are you leaning in or not? I don't want you to wait through this whole presentation going, oh, I don't like beauty products. I don't like nail salons. I don't like retail, whatever. And then at the end thinking, oh, but I like this person. And then I've missed you throughout, right? So I don't think I've ever seen a presentation do this before, but thinking through, how do I get these people to lean in? And then how do I get them to lean in more? I took that slide, that about us, the team slide that is usually at the end, and I moved my very first slide. And I said, I just want to tell you a little bit about me and why you should be listening before we get into the business. And I think that was one of the, that specific decision and other decisions like that, to think about how are people going to react and how can you tell your story in the way that it's going to land most effectively. I think that kind of thinking was helpful to me throughout the entire process.
Fascinating. So talk to us about how you managed decision-making and failure with Julep. I imagine every entrepreneur goes through this, a lot of self-doubt and figuring things out, because there's no playbook for how to build a successful business. Every business is different. Every entrepreneur is different. So I'm really interested to understand how you first kind of came up against this whole concept of failure, dealing with it and learning from it with Julep, first of all.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of thoughts on this, which is why it's the subject, it's the title of the conversation. But what drives me ballistic is when people say there's no such thing as failure, it's just a lesson. That's not true. There is failure first. Failure is a phase of a lesson, and it is not a, you don't end up learning from things if you don't take the failure and massage it and play with it and sort of roll around in it enough to pull what is the lesson out of it. So making a failure lesson is actually a lot of effort, and it's kind of painful. If you skip away from the failure and go on to the next thing and don't examine it, it's never going to be a lesson, and you're going to make that same mistake again. So there are such things as failures and mistakes. They're called phase one of a lesson that you can build on. And in between those two things takes a lot of work, introspection, therapy, coaching, self-reflection. So I think that's really important, that it's not just, oh, don't worry about getting this rejection or getting this whatever. It is, it's just, there's no such thing as failure. Failure is painful. It sucks. It's painful. It hurts when you make a mistake in hiring. That's the worst kind of mistake. When you trust in someone, you bring them in, and not that they let you down because you can take care of yourself, but more that you have let your other team down. Now you brought somebody in who is making life harder for a lot of people who are working hard because of a vision you shared with them. That is a kind of burden that feels terrible late at night and feels lonely, because at the end of the day, when they say it's lonely at the top, I used to imagine that it was because you were rich and counting your diamonds and
Right.
all alone. It's like, nope, it's I'm on an anthill. It's the top of a nothing burger. And still it's lonely because you're the one who's responsible. When people say, making payroll, it's such a real thing when you know the people's faces. When I first started Julep, it actually went spectacularly well. For about 9 months, I thought I was God's gift to business. I opened a second parlor, I raised more money. It was super easy. And then the financial crisis of 2008 hit.
Right.
And all of a sudden, our revenue dropped by 70%. So all of a sudden, I couldn't pay people. And I had convinced these women who were single moms to come work for me, right? And the stress of knowing Like, what am I going to do if I can't put money in their bank accounts? And so I just went to all of my landlords and I had signed leases against my house, right? So now I've got all of these things on the line. And I just went to them with full transparency. And I said, here's my revenue before the financial crisis. Here's my revenue now. I can't pay your rent. I just can't do it. And so you can go after my house, you can kick me out, but who else are you going to put in here right now? It's clearly not me, it's the country. And if you give me a chance and we come up with a payment plan, I will figure our way out of this. Let's do this together. I had 4 landlords, all 4 of them gave me a break. And this is the kind of thing that people don't think about, right? Like, there's no manual for this. I was just like stressing, seeing my bank account going to zero. And I thought, what have I got to lose? I will go transparently sit down with these people. I brought my bank account statements with me and our sales numbers. Like, they were like, wow, this is a lot. And I just gave them a super vulnerable, here's the scoop situation, because I felt like I had nothing to lose at that stage. And it's stuff that people don't think about. My hairdresser was telling me that she was had been paying rent all through COVID and using her retirement savings to do it. And I said, hey, have you asked your landlord for a break? Like, they know you're not open, you have zero revenue, you're a solo situation. Did you ever ask? And it hadn't occurred to her to sort of, it's like, oh, but I signed a lease. So I think also sort of always asking, kind of putting up your hand and saying, hey, is there any flexibility? There's usually no harm in that. No one's going to sue you for asking. And, often when people are like, well, then they'll know, it's like, they're going to know anyway. If your whole business goes under, then they're going to know, and you're still not going to pay. So it's being 3 months ahead and sharing sometimes is at least gives people the opportunity to be helpful.
Interesting. All right. So you sold Julep. Amazing exit there. And then you decided to jump back in and do another startup. Why? and you didn't do this, you didn't do an iteration on the same thing. You did a different business. So tell us about why you decided to jump back into the fray.
I didn't think that I would. I really thought that I was not. I hate the term serial entrepreneur. It feels to me like it's such a hard thing to start a company that it is sort of should be your life's work. I always poo-pooed that notion, and now I'm called that all the time. So I didn't think it would happen. I didn't think that I was going to start another company, and I think just the way it comes about is, it did happen in a lot of ways the same way as the first time, in that there was an idea that I couldn't get out of my head. All of a sudden, I found myself thinking about it all the time, in the shower, driving my kids to school. Just every time I had a spare minute, I realized I was iterating on this idea. And it came out of a need. The idea of reusable gift wrap came out of looking around Christmas time at all of the gift wrap that was piling up. And I researched, can I recycle it? And it turned out that all of the things that are pretty and sparkly, you can't recycle, or too thin or too coated. And so most of the mountains and mountains of garbage that were in my house on Christmas Day couldn't be recycled. And so as I started thinking about this idea and, how do you, I was also interested in this idea of QR codes and an idea of gift wrap that could maybe, you could add a card each time that you regift it. So it's like, how do you make regifting the point, not an embarrassing thing? Like, oh, I'm sorry, I regifted this, or you reuse this gift wrap. It's like, no, that's the whole point. So I started thinking about it, and I just could not get it out of my head. And then I, actually, in all transparency, because this is what happens in real life, is that my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And then the treatments, luckily, or, very fortunately for us, I guess it's not just luck, it's a lot of hard work from a lot of amazing scientists. But he's on immunotherapy and he was responding. And I think at that point he said, you need something to do other than make me smoothies every morning. So I went into it thinking, I want to take everything that I've learned and every hard thing I've come across, including Julep, the good times and the lonely times, and the moving through cancer diagnosis and really examining mortality and the meaning of life in a way that I hadn't since college and law school, and thinking about what your values are and what you want to do and what you want to contribute and how you want to do those things. And so for me, the expression of that was came about in starting a company that I could say, I want to put all of the things that I've learned, I want to do it right. I don't want to be pushed to grow faster than I feel like this needs to grow. I want to have the time to hire the people, to treat them the way I want to treat them, to do, and I think a lot of it actually was doubling down on the things we did right at Julep. So in a lot of ways, I'm working with the same people again. I hired my former creative director and my software engineer, and we often are saying with a little smile, sometimes it's even in the text, like a nod and a wink, we did this right. Let's do it again. Let's not reinvent the wheel. And sometimes it's like, remember how we always wanted to do the things differently here? Like, let's do it now. So the first experience has so much more meaning because it's referenced every day. It's an experience that we're building on, even though it's not the same company.
So I'm curious, you've spoken about failure in the context of your first company. How are you experiencing failure with Tokki, and how are you iterating on that? What is easier about failure, if that's possible, the second time around? What does it look like, smell like, feel like this time versus with Julep?
What I've learned is the most important lesson I've learned out of all of this is to plan for it. So if you say, hey, we're going to reach out to 5 retailers and try to land one, let's try to, and we sort of actually joke about it now. We say, let's go get us 4 rejections. Then it's different than, the going to every single account and thinking, oh, please take us. And what will happen to us if you reject us? And taking the rejection as, oh my gosh, this whole idea sucks and no one's ever going to buy it. If you say, let's go collect 4 and then we'll have a rejection party at the end of the week. I do that with my interns.
Are you serious? You do that?
Yeah. I do it with my interns. I encourage all of you to do this with your summer interns, to say your job is to find 2 failures or rejections. And I said that I wanted it in writing. I want you to go ask a social media, influencer for something and have them say no to you and bring it back to me and prove to me that you asked and failed. And then we celebrate that. It's like, hey, did you die? Are you embarrassed? Do you have a big scarlet reject letter on your chest? No, all of this is survivable if you plan for it. And actually what happens is that you ask for things that you might have been scared to ask for if you weren't expecting rejection. That gives you the freedom to ask for something bigger than, if last summer when we were, COVID happened, I launched Tokki, COVID happened, we switched to face masks because the cotton we had was really good for that. And so we hired 2 interns and I asked them to go get distribution for us. And so the way to get rejections is not to go to your aunt's gift shop, right? The way to get a rejection is to go ask the Smithsonian whether they will carry our, women of influence face mask that had the drawings of all these women. It was like, maybe they'll take it, but maybe they'll say no. And, but if you're looking for the no, if you're looking for rejection, you're going to reach higher than if I asked them for 100% success rate, they would have gone small and they wouldn't have dared to ask this influencer to post, or they wouldn't have, done all of these things that they ended up doing because it was their job to collect rejections.
Wow. Okay. I have so many more questions to ask you. I'm going to ask you, we do need to leave time for the audience to ask some questions. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then Ellen can come back and start to, field the questions from our audience. And I encourage all of you who are in the audience to think about what you would like to ask Jane. A few more questions that I have. I'm going to ask two more, and then we'll pivot. One of the things that really struck me about last year was how not only the pandemic changed the way that we all looked at ourselves, our families, the world, and how we moved within it, but also the murder of George Floyd, and how it really forced everyone to take a very different look at how we all interacted with each other and the systems and structures we all operate in. I'm curious if that also affected the way that you decided to approach Tokki and as you continue to build out the company.
It absolutely did. And I think we really grappled with honestly, with some of our shortcomings and with the things that we might want to do that could make an impact. So shortcomings wise, we thought, hey, even though we're small, there's only 3 of us, that's still not an excuse. Can we now start building our pipeline for for more diverse candidates that we can bring in down the road? We definitely took time to stop and reflect. We talked about the images that we put out there. And it's just so interesting. A lot of the times, about systemic racism, it takes several layers of why and more digging to sort of to combat it, right? So a small example is that we looked at our website, and it is all, at the time, now I can't remember what is on it. So, oh my gosh, now you guys are going to look, and I can't even remember now at this very current stage, but I know we have what we have in the works. But at the time with face masks, it was all blue-eyed blonde people on our website. Why? Because we don't have models. So it was my software engineer who was blue-eyed and blonde, and her adorable children are blue-eyed and blonde. And we just needed some quick and dirty Apple phone shots of what a face mask looks on a face. And so she did herself and her husband and her kids. And all of a sudden we have no diversity on our website. And so that's how it happened. And so we thought, okay, let's hire, let's actually plan for it. So a lot of the way that you can combat these things, like time is the enemy of everything planful and thoughtful and good. And what's hard as an entrepreneur is to make time for a commitment to addressing systemic racism when you are not profitable and there's COVID and you're just trying to survive. So every day you make a choice, it's a commitment, and it takes more planfulness. You cannot just slide in getting more diverse candidates. You can't just slide in having a more diverse looking website off the cuff. It takes a ton of planning. So we went and we were like, we're going to plan the next photo shoot. We're actually going to spend some money against it. This is important. And we're going to find a Black model. It turns out it's really hard in COVID to find any model. And in Seattle, what the modeling agency told us is that not enough people want to use or request, like older, normal looking Black models. And so we don't, we can fly somebody up from LA. So, it was hard because of systemic racism to there weren't a lot of women in these jobs, and it was hard therefore for us to find them. So this is like a super small, kind of silly, potentially insignificant example, but it's a thing of like how this happens, that I'm just being transparent about like our limitations. And when we said we want to make some commitments, we want to try as much as we can, this is what it meant, to be more planful and to, to not leave everything to the last minute so that we have to just use our own selfies in our images. And also, how can we, even if we had to do that, have our selfies reflect a more diverse workforce. So I think nothing is perfect. And I think the thing that people don't realize is it's not just stopping and reading. It's every time that you want to do something a little bit better than the way you did it before, not that that's going to change the universe. I think it takes a lot of effort. And I think maybe that's something that we don't talk about, that really caring is not just in your heart. It's going to take time and effort and planfulness and sometimes more money. And that is, I just want to say those things out loud, because I think that should be the expectation. It's not just that we stop on Juneteenth and read more. That's important and we should, but the systemic racism happens in lots of little ways, and combating it also happens in lots of little ways. But just because it's little doesn't mean that it is a small commitment. Those little things can take so much effort to make happen.
I think that was an excellent example. Thank you, Jane. I will save my last question till the very end. Ellen, you want to come on and let's just please leave me time for my last little question. But
all right.
It's all yours.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we've had a couple of questions come in through the chat, so I will lob them over to you. So we have a question from Fong Liu. As a female entrepreneur, do you think it is more difficult to start your own business? And then also, how do you balance between your business and your family?
So on the first one, it's so hard. I think I did not want to admit to the challenges that I was facing as a woman entrepreneur. Everything was so hard, right? Like everything is hard. How do you know what is hard? Because you're a woman, because you're Korean, because nobody that you're pitching to looks at all like you. I certainly had people, I had one VC say to me transparently, he said, I really like you as an entrepreneur. I think you're backable. I think your economics look good. He said, I only do one deal a year, which is kind of crazy, right? If you think about VC, the thing that people don't realize is that they might be doing 2 to 3 meetings a day. But if they do one deal a year, that's pretty amazing. Sometimes it's one deal every other year. So the odds of, moving from a coffee meeting to getting funding is ridiculous, right? So I kind of say VC is like democracy. It's kind of insane, but we're lucky to have it. And that's how I feel about, so was it helpful or not? I don't know. I mean, you bring your life experience. I think the ways in which I am strong as an entrepreneur are absolutely because I'm an immigrant woman. Are there barriers that I face because of that? I'm sure, right? And as I looked back, some of the terms that I had to address and some of the valuations and the things that were said, of course, but I don't know how to focus on that or not. I think a way that we can help each other combat systemic sexism is we can help each other. We can speak the truth when it happens to you. You can say, yeah, it happened to me too. I definitely do that with other female entrepreneurs. The opposite of that story I was telling in the Silicon Valley VC lobby happens with me and tons of other women, that you kind of look at each other a little bit. And then, when you say, how's it going? So some people answer, we're killing it. And I joke about Silicon Valley, like these bro entrepreneurs, is that it's amazing anything's alive because they're killing everything. But sometimes you meet an entrepreneur, mainly it's women, or it's, and, I'll say, hey, how's it going? And she'll say, oh my gosh, it's so hard. And then I know we're having a real conversation. Or sometimes I'll just say, what's hard? Actually, I mentor these two women entrepreneurs in London, actually. And I start off the week saying, what was hard this week? Because the space to say that out loud, I love that Brene Brown quote, that connection is what banishes shame. And so that thing that makes you feel alone as an entrepreneur, when you're lying there thinking, I suck at this, I screwed up that, I wish I had done this differently, maybe as an entrepreneur, just as a human being, then pick up the phone and call somebody who can help be your witness to say, I know that you are not a stupid, lame, terrible human being. And maybe you made a mistake, or maybe you could have said that better, but that doesn't mean that you are less in worth. And so I think being able to connect with other people is super helpful. And that's how maybe, you can take this thing. There's absolutely systemic sexism. There's absolutely systemic racism. I'm also super grateful to all the VCs who worked with me, and to all the investors who invested in my idea. So both of those things are true at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I also tell everybody to find their support group of people who are, around them, who share similar challenges. And I think that's super important. Awesome. All right. So we have another question from Pian Pian. So question around, when do you think is a good time for raising funding versus bootstrapping? How much traction do you need, or do you have any thoughts around that?
It's so hard. The real truth is that your baby is prettiest before you have traction. So if you have the capability, the connections, the ability to fundraise before you have any traction. I have a joke that I used to say to my another fellow woman entrepreneur, that traction is just like the thing they tell you because they don't have the guts to say no. My husband's grandmother used to say about bridge, if you can't play well, play quickly. And I often think that to VCs, like, if you're not going to make the right call, just do it quickly. And the worst thing that they do is when they say we want to see more traction, because you can say that all the way through, almost IPO and later. Like, so many companies I know, amazing companies that are run by women, they're told, hey, we want to see more traction. We want to see profitability. We want to see 10 million. We want to see 100 million. We want to see 500 million and for you to be profitable. And it's like, well, Amazon isn't profitable, like Facebook isn't profitable. There are, all these other companies that are that go public, and even right up to that stage and beyond, you could be asked for more traction, right? More proof, more. So I think kind of don't fall for it. Go for, raise the money you need to raise to make the business what it needs to be. So I really believe that I don't believe in Citizens United. I don't believe that corporations are people. I do believe in, though, that a company, the part that I do believe in that is that a company is an entity that when you start thinking, what is the best decision I can make for this concept, for this idea, for the honoring the potential, then you start making the right call. So it's not about what would be easier for Jane, or what would, the employees, like, you're always balancing your interests, your shareholders' interests, your balancing all of these different things as an entrepreneur. It's all on you to make it all fit together in some way and try to find that little speck of the Venn diagram where all of these interests can align, and that's your creative job. Actually, that does go to, I realize I didn't answer the family question earlier, but all of the balancing, I think, happens on, I think one thing you can do is think about it in a quarterly chunk. So on any given day, I might not have balance. I might have worked all day, or I might have taken the day off and spent it with my family. But can you, within a month-long time frame or a 3-month-long time frame, feel like you lived a balanced life? Where I define balance as, did I give enough attention to the areas that I care about? And so if it starts going longer than 2 to 3 months where you feel out of whack, then you've got to go back and reevaluate and figure out how to do something else. On any given day, any of us might be out of whack, right? On any given week, you might have a week here and there where one thing has to suffer or not. But I will say that one of the few things I regret, I have very few regrets, but one thing I regret is that I gave up on, there was a vacation early on in Julep that I didn't go on. My husband took our kids to the North Carolina coast with his parents and with his mom, and I didn't go. And I so regret that. I see those photos on my computer and I think, what did I do that week that changed the trajectory of the company? Nothing. I just felt like I'm stressed, so I'm going to cut the spreadsheet again. I'm going to do one more model. I'm going to do one more pricing assumption. But it didn't actually fundamentally change anything. What would have changed is if I had energy for my business, if I had preserved that like its most precious resource. I mean, the thing as an entrepreneur is that you're really in the business of peddling your energy. That is why VCs want to hang out with you and give you their money. That is why employees want to join you, why customers will want to pay for whatever you're building. You are in the business of sharing your energy. And if your energy is zapped because you are not living your values, then it's really hard. It feels more lonely. You are making it so much harder on yourself. I made it so much harder myself. I'm not lecturing you. I'm sort of speaking to the younger me that it didn't have to be that hard and lonely if I realized that the job wasn't to live up to the next board meeting. I was always trying to impress the next board meeting, to be ahead of goals, because that's who I am, right? I exceed expectations, and it's hard to do that all the time as an entrepreneur. And that wasn't the right metric. It wasn't about surprising and delighting my board members. It was really, what am I doing to nurture this idea, to give it the most potential? So back to fundraising, fundraise when it's the best for the company, when you think it is the right time to give that entity the space that it needs. And thinking about it that way, while also protecting your energy as one of your most precious resources.
I think that's so important to avoid burnout, and then also to set a good example for your team to take time for yourself and to give them the space to take time. I know we've only got about 4 minutes left, and I know, Wendy, you wanted to leave some time for your question. Should we get that in right now?
I would say, see if you can pluck another question or two from the chat. I'd like to make sure that our audience gets in theirs. Mine is very brief. Awesome.
There's a really quick one, I think, that might be very helpful. So what mentoring networks have been supportive for you on your journey, both at Yale and beyond? And is there any advice for entrepreneurs that are early in their journey? And I would say specifically, I guess, for finding help and mentorship.
Gosh, I don't know that that's a short answer, in that I don't think I had one really. The thing about mentorship, I think maybe I defined it the wrong way. I wanted to see somebody who looked like me, who had kids, who was a woman who was an entrepreneur and was making it all work. And then I could ask her, hey, how are you doing it? And can you give me the manual? And the truth is, it doesn't work that way. Actually, I find it very awkward when people call me and say, will you be my mentor? It's like, you know, do you want to marry me? Like, not obviously it's not like that permanent and legal of a thing, but you have to get to know people first, right? And I would say that anybody can be your mentor if you learn from them and watch them. So there were a lot of people, probably my parents, honestly, you know, the leaders that I work with. One of the best things about being a consultant at BCG was just actually the deal flow of seeing so many different people and the way they would lead. And so I got to watch all these different people and borrow little bits from them. They would never say that they were my mentor. So what you can learn from people can come from a lot of different places. Then there's the thing of when you're in trouble. So I think all of us can keep a list. And I don't know that, you know, Daryl Cavins, who was the CEO of Zulily, I don't know that he would have said he was my mentor. I ever called him that. I had 2 conversations with him where he was super helpful. And then one night when I was fundraising late at night, I emailed him and I said, Daryl, you are the only person I have an email address to who can answer this question about fundraising from VCs. Would you talk to me for 15 minutes? I know I don't know you that well, but I really need to just check in with you. And he emailed me back right away. He was like, you know what, this is like, come over to my house. I still remember this. I showed up at like 10:30 and his wife was like, what are you doing here? I was like, I need to ask Daryl a question. But, you know, I'd never had a term sheet before. I didn't know what to do. I was in this pickle. People were saying, you can't do this, you can do that. You have, you know, whatever, exclusivity. I just didn't know. I wanted to do the right thing. But there's so much pressure and it's all in a time constraint. So you can do that. A few times, and people have done that to me. If you say to someone, not just like, oh, I want to pick your brain or I want to learn from you, but if you're like, you are the only person in the whole world I can talk to who has an insight into this problem, that is a super compelling ask. And I think it is really hard to find someone who would turn that down.
Awesome. We did actually have another question, and I know we talked about this at the beginning of how to keep in touch with you. So I think that would also be a good time to drop your Instagram and blog link in.
Oh yeah. Great. Thanks. Yeah, I am at Jane Park Seattle on Instagram. It's probably the best spot. I also, if you want to email me, I am at janep@tokki.com. Actually, if you do email me, I will send you, I am starting I had a link to my blog, See Jane Wonder. I'm starting a podcast. So if you want to stay in touch, I would love to keep you posted on that. And if you drop me an email at janep@tokki.com, I will keep you posted on my progress and on these other creative projects.
You got it.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. So just 2 very quick questions. We'll go over just a couple minutes here. One is, I'm really interested to know who inspires you, Jane. Really curious, given everything that you've talked to us about, who lights you up and who do you look up to? And then secondly, what parting words of wisdom would you like to share with our audience, particularly with regards to the topic in question tonight?
I have a sort of a cheesy answer to the who inspires you, but I think about that as kind of who gives you energy. And I think that is really my mom, to sort of how hard everything is every day when you can't express yourself in the language of your new home. the way that you could, that, you know, she would always say like, you know, I am smart, even though I can't speak English perfectly. And I totally knew that. I believe that. I never thought that she wasn't smart, but so it was something that she was clearly not just saying to me, but to herself. But the creativity it takes to build a life somewhere where you are so challenged and where you can't be fully seen as the full spectrum of who you are, I think is so courageous and inspiring. So having a front row seat to that every day, I think nothing that I have done will ever be as hard as what they have done. And you know, my dad was an orphan. He lost his parents when he was 9, when the border between his school and his family home went up. So they don't tell you when they're going to put up a border between North and South Korea. It just happens. And sometimes a kid is on one side and his parents are on the other. So when you see that, we're just remarkably resilient. Like whenever things are hard, I would say to you, so this will dovetail into that. You are more resilient than you know. Every time I have wondered, am I strong enough to deal with this? Am I, you know, how can I do this? It turns out that you are. Like the things, the range of human experience I've seen, from, you know, kids who are losing their siblings to cancer, to people who are building businesses and homes in a land they're unfamiliar with, you know, to people who have lost everything and started again. It is in all of us. We are more resilient. And if you're not feeling that way, when you start feeling like everything sucks, the black and whiteness of it, that is your brain telling you you need to recharge your energy in some way. That it's not actually true that you suck. It just is an SOS from your system saying, you know, plug in the battery before it you know, dissipates further.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jane. Over to you, Ellen.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Big thank you for everybody for your questions. I apologize that we weren't able to get to them all. There were a lot of messages of support and people connecting with your message. So thank you everybody for your participation. We'd also like to thank our co-sponsors once again, Yale Law School and Yale Women. You are amazing partners. We'd also like to thank the YA Shared Interest Groups for making this event possible. A recording of today's webinar will be posted on the Accelerate Yale LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube channel. All right, and thank you so much, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.